Good day, learners. I would like you to refer to page 2 of your resource pack. Today, we're going to be looking at the questions based on the causes of the Great Depression. This is a source-based question. I will be referring to the sources firstly, and adjacent to that, we will be looking at the questions. As you can see on the screen, there is a key question there related to the Great Depression. It says, what were the causes of the Great Depression? And if you recall, we said, whenever we look at causes, we are looking for the reasons or asking the question, why did something happen? Or what led to a particular event taking place? So let's look at the first source. Always bear in mind that you need to identify key words in the source. If there are any words you do not understand, you will need to consult a dictionary, because all source-based questions are basically comprehension questions. Source 1A says, this source explains the reasons and the impact of the Fordney-Macumber Act. In the first sentence already, there's an important word, the word impact. Impact refers to the effect, consequences, or results of an event or a policy, or in this case, the law that was passed known as the Fordney-Macumber Act. The Fordney-Macumber Act raised tariffs to levels higher than any previously in American history in an attempt to bolster the pre-war economy, to protect new war industries, and to aid farmers. This sentence tells us that the government decided to increase tariffs. Tariffs could be another word for taxes or rates. In particular, the government decided to increase taxes for importing of goods. And we'll see why in a short while. Duties on Chinaware, pig iron, textiles, sugar, and rails were restored to the high levels of 1907, and increases ranging from 60 to 400% were established on dyes, chemicals, silk and rayon textiles, and hardware. Tariffs on a variety of agricultural produce was also raised. Although the tariffs encouraged the growth of monopoly in the United States, they also made it difficult for European powers to earn sufficient dollars to repay debts. Other nations responded by increasing their tariffs, thus limiting United States exports and constricting the market. These factors helped to create the weaknesses that produced the Depression. So let's go back to the reasons that are given as to why the law was passed. Here you see it says to bolster the post-war economy. Bolster means to increase or to improve or push up the economy, to protect new industries, and to aid farmers. Aid farmers means to assist the agricultural sector. Duties on Chinaware, pig iron, textiles, sugar, and rails were restored to the high levels of 1907. What this tells us is that the government increased the import rates, which are commonly called custom duties, to such a level as had been the case long before the First World War. Remember, the First World War was 1914 to 1918. So in 1907, there was a fairly high level of import duties. The government raised it once again in the 1920s to those levels. Now, why did the government do this? They wanted to prevent people importing goods or companies importing goods. whenever a country imports goods, it means that money leaves the country. So to prevent this, the presidents and the American government decided that they will increase tariffs to discourage the growth of or the increase of imported goods in the United States. Here they tell you this encouraged the growth of monopoly. Because imports were not allowed on a large scale, or it was limited on a large scale, there were many companies that began to control certain products. And a monopoly means one company or one organization or one institution controlling a certain sector. So as an example, if I said there is only one store in Verulam that can sell Albany bread, that means they have the monopoly on Albany bread. The effect of this was it made it difficult for Europeans to earn sufficient dollars to pay war debts. You will remember that many European countries had borrowed money from the United States during the First World War. They needed it for weapons, for their soldiers' uniforms, for food, etc. Now they needed to repay that war debt, but their countries could not improve economically because the United States basically prevented them from improving their economies. So these nations, they refer here as other nations, they responded by increasing their own tariffs. What they said is, if the United States is going to charge us high tariffs, we in turn will charge the US high tariffs for exporting to our countries. So if they try to sell their products in our countries, we will put a limit on it by charging them high import duties. Now let's look at the questions associated with these sources. The first one asks, why, according to the source, did the American government pass the Fordney-McCumber Act? The rule is to look at the question and look at the mark scheme associated with that question. In this case, it says 3 times 1. And the 3 times 1, of course, refers to 3 answers for 1 mark, which will give us a total of 3. So if we go back to the source, we can see here, there are reasons given. According to the source, there were 3 reasons given for the introduction of this act. And here we have it. The first question is as follows. It was to bolster the post-war economy, in other words, to improve the economy, to protect new war industries, that's the building of tanks, weapons, etc., and to assist farmers. Simple, taken directly from the source. Let's now look at the second question. It says, list any 3 products which became expensive as a result of the high duties. Going back to the source, as you can see here, there's a series of items that were affected, starting with Chinaware, pig iron, etc. So if you look at the answers in that case, you can choose any 3 from this list. Chinaware, pig iron, textiles, sugar, rail dyes. Rails, dyes is a separate word, there's an error here. Chemicals, silk, rayon, and textiles. And hardware, beg your pardon. Going back to the third question, use the source and your own knowledge to explain the impact of this act on the economy of European powers. Impact, we said, refers to the effect. So if you look at the source, you can see here clearly the impact means there was a positive or negative result. The impact was it made it difficult for European powers to earn sufficient dollars to pay their war debts. Okay, So you can choose any one of these answers here as they tell you. Please ignore the numbering here. You will take it as 1.1, 1.3, etc. This will be referred to as question 1. So you could say they could not repay the war debt, or they could not sell their own products in the US, or the European powers were forced to increase taxes on United States imports. The following question asks, why do you think the European powers owed the USA war debt? Now here they say, why do you think? So as long as you give a valid reason, your answer will be correct. You could choose from one of these. The USA supplied the European powers with money, machinery, and agricultural goods during the war. You will recall they took loans. They had also borrowed machinery, and they had bought agricultural goods. So the United States had assisted with that. Now the US wanted their money back. So it becomes a debt, D-E-B-T. A second reason is the US was not involved in the war, but they supplied the Allied powers. A third reason, the farmers and factories were producing in mass to supply local and international markets. So any one of those three reasons could be used to explain why the Europeans owed Americans money. The last one asks you, explain how the Fordney-McCumber Act contributed to the Great Depression. Here, you will look at how the Europeans themselves distanced themselves from the United States. The European countries produced for themselves after the war, so they bought less from America. So obviously, there's less income for the Americans with regard to military provision. The second reason that could be given, the European countries imposed high tariffs on American imports and made it difficult for the US to sell their surplus overseas. What this means is, because America had increased their own import duties, the Europeans did the same. They said they will also restrict American goods coming into their country by charging high tariffs. And therefore, it made it difficult for the Americans to sell their surplus. Surplus means any extra goods that they had. They couldn't sell it overseas easily because they were being charged high customs duties. A third reason you could give is that the US farmers and factories were saddled with surplus products which they could not sell. Saddled with means they were overloaded. They had too many extra goods that had been overproduced, and they had no market to sell these goods. This now puts a temporary stop to this lesson. We will resume with the second part in the next recording.